Test, test, test. Am I live now? Great. Hello there. Hello again. What is going on, YouTubers and my most beloved subscribers, supporters slash patronage. Beg your pardon. My most beloved patrons, welcome to another live stream. So yeah, it's the 2nd of August, year 2025 again. Both that local Beijing time and Australian Eastern Standard Time / Sydney time. So as promised, here I would like to talk about institutional misandry / why they hate masculinity, why they hate and oppress masculinity so much to the point they seize every opportunity they can get their hands on to hinder and if not totally prevent men from expressing our masculine ways of doing things, of expressing and voicing our thoughts and opinions, and so on and so forth. Well, I won't say that I have done and such an extensive range or amount of research or due diligence that to talk to dive in so deep into such main topic. Though I speak from my own my very own personal experiences and thoughts and interpretations of how the system, how the matrix tends to program and recondition boys since early childhood all the way to adulthood. Basically, yeah, I don't know much about how in the old days before the 80s or the 70s of the 20th century, how the government, how the regimes worked their ways to arrange or administer gender segregations in schoolings. But back in the old days, they tend to at least arrange or at least impose gender, or sex segregations amongst schools, and that could include institutions of higher education, say universities, or colleges, or say, in under the context of America, or North America. But I haven't been, I haven't set my foot, to the to the North American continent, so I can't really say, so I can't really um you know um comment, or speculate that much about, how exactly back then, the American gender segregations in schoolings worked. So yeah, but at least, yeah, back then, they still offered, or at least they still used to, at least um, provide, a vastly different and distinct system of ed- um, education, for both gen- genders, respectively speaking. But nowadays, just they, you know as Uncle Coach Red Pill has, you know pointed, I beg your pardon, pointed out, quite long time ago, that basically nowadays school system, they basically just, treat boys as if they were defective girls. That says, they restrict, if not utterly oppress, boys from, expressing, their natural, their intrinsic way of learning, way of living, way of, um, say, acquiring knowledge and language and skills, that sort of thing. They just, basically, they just, force boys, to sit still, like girls, and just, treat them in a way that severely, and that overwhelmingly and severely hinders, their natural, their intrinsic, way of learning, of acquiring knowledge and skills. you know but I suppose, um, it is a rather generalized, a rather, over generalized, means, to look at, to look at the whole picture, to look at the big, the big picture. I beg your pardon. But that was, back then, back when I was in Singapore. They just, you know they did not, well, at least back, at, the international school, in which I received my secondary education. They did not apply, nor impose, the um, um, conventional system of schooling that featured gender segregation, in which you know boys and girls was supposed to be kept and schooled separately and differently. Yeah, and in such system, they do not encourage boys to to learn from, say, to I don't really know much about how exactly they apply those approaches, or say the way of um you know training, um um or training, or teaching. I beg your pardon, but the current system frowns upon expressing aggression, and they just don't allow, say, boys to to have fights, to get physical with one another. Though yes, I am, as as a reasonable man, I do not, I am no fan of of violence either. However, I do not, um, say, I do not think that you know, um, boys should be completely, um, you know, you know, disallowed or prohibited from from having a bit of skirmishes with one another, when it comes to solving um or pacifying personal disputes, and that sort of thing. That's the since that's the masculine way of getting things sorted. And yes, I do believe um every man, if not every boy, should know how to fight. Though yes, on the other hand, that, however, does not necessarily suggest or imply that I fully support, you know, um, conscriptions, or something like that. But at least as a man, you should know, how to, you know, look out for yourself, how not to look weak, so that others, regardless of genders, could bully you, or harm, or harm you, or harm those you love and care about, and blah blah blah. Yeah. On the other hand, about the about ins- institutional misandry. One thing, that I have, one thing that I have noticed, since, you know ever since I developed, self-awareness, um, is that they just they tend to um, depict or you know um, portray men as the ultimate villains, instead of women. They just um, kind of selectively overlook the the fact that women can commit a vast amount of atrocities, or monstrosities, you know just like men, if not a whole lot worse than men do. That you know well, still, but I suppose the notable, one of the most notable exceptions I can think of is the queen, yes, the queen, yes, the step the notorious step mother of Princess Snow White. Yeah, in case you still happen to remember a little bit. um but yeah, you know um um furthermore, throughout the whole globe, um this applies to both western countries and or regions and Asian states. They just encourage men to shave their beard, to shave our beard, and here and there, just to look presentable in front of strangers. Well, even I have to shave my beard. Though more often than not, I often find myself too lazy, too unmotivated to even um you know to even want to even consciously want to shave my own beard. But still, yeah, I still keep beard. I still keep most of my facial hairs on my cheeks. But I just shaved all or nearly all of them, from from the areas surrounding my mouth, and from the a- area between my nose and my mouth. Yeah, so just to look socially acceptable and presentable. So yeah, I suppose that can count as a as another sort of indicator that they they, I mean the ruling class, the slave masters, you know consciously and deliberately deliberately suppress and oppress masculinity. And why they do that, first of all, I give you one obvious reason they do so, to to secure their 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 rules, their sovereignty, they do so to make sure that most, if not all of us, just stay silent, stay quiet when facing oppression and unfair treatment, so that they maintain their their sovereignty. Welcome to the live stream. The camera quality on this stream looks really nice, and the connection is also good. Thank you so much for your compliments. Yeah, I'm glad to see. I'm glad to receive some highly positive feedback from my fellow viewers. Yeah, so yeah, back to the main back to the main theme, back to the main um, topic of this live streaming session. Yes, the ruling class and the slave masters deliberately uh, uh, oppress masculinity to secure and ensure their prolonged ruling, their prolonged social programming, and I beg your pardon, so that they can remain in control of our thoughts, of our outlooks about the odds of succeeding in overthrowing their dominance. Yeah, that sort of thing. And they also keep attacking masculinity, so that so to keep us men weak and vulnerable and in a state of constant despair and desperation and learned helplessness, or acquired helplessness. I don't know if you guys are familiar with such term. Learned helplessness. Yeah, that sort of thing. And I suppose a constant a constant or prolonged state of learned helplessness vastly improves and strengthens their odds of securing their their sovereignty. Yeah. Hi there, the wheel of life. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, and thank you so much for joining in this live stream. It's great to lovely to have you here. Yeah, and yeah, though I didn't really expect that many folks to 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 have tuned in to my live stream, and I beg your pardon for my persistent starting. I am just so freaking annoyed by it. It's freaking shite. I wish I could just get rid of my stuttering like magic. But yes, I do remember that I managed to get to have got rid of my stuttering at least on two occasions back then. But ever since, my grandma kicked her bucket in in October year 2022. I just it felt like it felt as if I I lost a garrison of armies on at a stronghold on my mind, inside my mental barriers of some sort. So yeah, it's just so freaking frustrating. um Thank you so much. Yeah, I just don't know if if what I've said about their de- deliberate attempts to suppress and oppress masculinity makes sense to you guys out there. But still, yeah, at least, yeah, at least I can at least confirm that I have managed to get most of my messages across, despite the geographical um, distances and um, barriers. Yeah, I for which I beg your pardon. Yeah, but yeah, so that's basically the main the main two reasons, why I you know I believe they constantly frown upon the expression of masculinity. And yes, and on the other hand, they proactively uh, you know bet and encourage the notorious LGBT propaganda and movements, to you know to to lure boys to cut off their private parts and you know to self mutilate. What is going on, King? Welcome back to my channel and the live stream. Yeah, lovely to have you here as always. Yeah, I'm not sure if this live stream could could get my channel banned from YouTube. I don't know, but I am I here I am willing to risk it. See how far they are willing to go to suppress and oppress masculinity. Yeah, though despite the fact that I've only acquired less than 900 subscribers, you know throughout my my um my 13-year career as a YouTuber and a digital nomad bomb. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear it. To hear that you enjoy um, being here. Yeah, and yeah, yes. On the other hand, about this about this about the suppression, about the deliberate oppression of masculinity. They often, praise girls. They often, give, girls, a lot more validations, a lot more encouragement, than they do to boys. know, well, say back then, but during during my early, my well, I should say throughout my childhood and my adolescent years, I don't really remember that I got praised or I got a, any compliment or validations or approval from any female educator. I just don't know if boys nowadays can actually get liked by their female teachers or but yes, there are certain though yes, according to the news, I've heard and watched on YouTube a lot of female educators got too way too intimate with with their with their students. And I wish, I just kind of wish that back then, my my teachers could have showed me that much amount of love and validation. But I suppose can never that can never happen in my case. It shall, in other words, I you know it shall remain forever a wet dream of mine. Yeah. May I ask, do you have Facebook or Discord? I don't do Facebook myself, but if you have Discord, I would definitely sign up. Yes, I do have I do. I do occasionally go on Discord to have some chats. Yes, I will forward you the link here if you don't mind. Just give me a sec. There's a link here in case you hadn't noticed. Yeah, I'll forward it here. Yeah, feel free to join. Yeah, but I don't really show up there as frequently as I do here to YouTube. So yeah, so do expect a significantly longer response time. Yeah, but yeah, I don't really have much else to say, other than what I've already mentioned and outlined as to why I suppose the system, the matrix, hates masculinity, or hates and um, the daily expression of masculinity. I beg your pardon. No worries and no rush. Um, um, take your time. No rush. Yeah, I'm not, rushing you to, to join my Discord server. Just, join it and read the messages there during your own time at your own pace. Yeah, learn, do things with as little pressure as you can to achieve maximal amount and level of efficiency and efficacy slash effectiveness. Yeah. May may I ask your may I ask your thoughts on NoFap? People say if one does it for long periods of time, it boosts testosterone. Do you think this is true? I'd say it is um, partly true, partially true. There's I can assure you that you will get a boost. In terms of your both your physical and mental energy levels. But you won't and can't expect to all of a sudden gain an increased level of attraction to females. That's not true. But well, still, as you may know, the level of attractiveness to females depends heavily on several factors. Um, not just your physical, your physical prowess, but also say your level of zen, your ability to keep your emotions at bay, aka emotional control capabilities, and so on and so forth. But long story short, do not expect no fap or semen retention to work like magic just for the sole sake of self improvement. No, you can fap moderately, but don't overdo it, and neither should you overdo no fap. Just and follow your well. My own take on this is just follow your own natural sex drive. Whenever you begin to have an overwhelming level of sexual urge or or sexual tension, just get rid of it ASAP, and then to back to the um back to the back to practicing self improvement. But long story short, do not treat no fap as magic. No, not at all. But still, you can practice no fap and and fasting every now and then to strengthen your resolve and physical and mental endurance. Yeah, that is my take on NoFap. Long story short, in summary, yeah. But other than that, yeah. Thanks for answering. I always thought that NoFap can't make one more physically attractive. How could it? It's not going to change one's facial features. I appreciate your answer. No worries, my pleasure. Anytime. Yeah, I'm glad that you find my response adequate. Yeah, but yes, I suppose I shall talk more about my thoughts and um, discoveries on NoFap in the future. Yeah, I shall, I suppose I shall talk more about it in the future. Yeah, just to and yeah, I just in any event, um, the last just bear this in mind. The last thing that they want to see, the last thing the system, the matrix wants to see is that we men stand in unity to achieve a common goal. you know instead of wandering and doom scrolling aimlessly and mindlessly following orders and social norms, as the vast majority of those NPCs tend to do on a daily basis. Just have your go your own way, but on the other hand, learn to follow the lead of stronger men, um, deserving more and all. Yeah, but I suppose I am I am nowhere closer to that yet. I'm still I still consider myself a digital nomad slash a digital nomad bomb. I still lack the both the experience and the level or power of intimidation to enforce or impose military command. So yeah, but I will see what I can do improve improve that in the future, if God willing. Yeah, but yeah, in case you guys have no other questions, maybe I have talked quite enough. So yeah, and yes, last but not least, shout out, shout out and massive thank you, to an anonymous dude, apparently from Britain, who kindly and generously, chipped in a massive 50, no, a massive 60 quid to my, to my buy me a coffee page. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, it greatly helped. Though it still you know takes at least several days for the platform to verify the authenticity of such transaction for it to reach me eventually. But we'll see how that goes. And I beg your pardon again for another stuttering. But yeah, I don't believe one can change their character. Maybe not, but we shall see. Yeah, maybe for women, I suppose mostly you are right, but for men, men can change drastically in terms of character, in terms of say level of morality and virtue, blah blah blah. Since I used to be, well, at least I can speak from myself that I used to to take so little care in sympathizing and um, empathizing with others. Apparently, due to lack of a decent female role model. Since I frequently got abused by my birth mother, and I still nowadays face um, persecutions from her from time to time. But yeah, that shall qualify for another video. So I won't waste any more of your guys' time here. So, but yeah, in any event and in any regards, thank you massively again for tuning in and your kind patronage. So yeah, I would try to to work my angles to negotiate with Patreon. No matter how much of a twat, no matter how much of a twat and a piece of shite they have been. But yeah, we shall see how that. We shall see whether it can work out eventually. Yeah. So yeah, in any event, thank you again for tuning in and for your kind and generous support. So yeah, as always, stay far from weak and stay out of trouble. And if God willing, I shall see you guys around back on YouTube, rumble.com, MGTOW.tv, and etc. So yeah, cheers, take care, stay out of trouble, and stay far from weak. Bye, cheers. Amen.